this morning to the King Institute for Faith and Culture. It's good to see you here. On this date in 1973, NASA launched the fourth and final Skylab mission. NASA's goal for the project was to find out if it was possible for humans to live and work in space for extended periods of time. Clearly they had not seen Star Trek. That's okay. The third and final crew of Skylab, launched on this date, spent 89 days in space, a record that stood for more than 20 years. Skylab served as a solar observatory, a microgravity lab, a medical lab, and an Earth observing facility. The astronauts had 2 hours of free time every evening, during which they could play cards or darts, read or listen to music. I don't know why you would take darts to space. I really don't. Skylab Corps Commander Gerald Carr said, "The most fun was looking out the window." NASA had originally planned for Skylab to continue orbiting for up to 10 more years while the space shuttle was being developed, but unexpectedly high solar activity, which heated the Earth's atmosphere and created excessive drag on the space station, I did not write that part, caused Skylab to malfunction in 1977, and it plummeted back to Earth in 1979. Pieces of it fell on the Shire of Esperance. Does anybody know where that is? Sounds like something out of Tolkien, but it's actually near Perth in southwestern Australia. And the Shire got mad and fined the United States $400 Australian for littering. It's a true story. The fine remained unpaid for 30 years until an American radio host raised the funds from his morning show listeners. I could see Dr. Ray Bloomer, a man with honor and respect for duty, raising money for an unpaid debt he did not personally owe, but felt it was right to pay, even if it was about space debris. So welcome this morning, Dr. Ray Bloomer, our very own, to introduce our speaker today.
Well, good morning all. Look around at how many people are here. This is the best turnout I've seen in a long time, and it's great to see you all. Before I start the introduction, I'd like to thank Dr. Harris and Dr. Ong for allowing me to host our guest and to introduce him. It's really an honor for me to do that. Brother Guy Consolmagno earned his bachelor's and master's degrees at MIT, and then his PhD in planetary sciences at the University of Arizona. He proudly served in the African area with the Peace Corps. After becoming a Jesuit brother in 1989, he joined the Vatican Observatory in 1993, where he served as the curator of the Vatican's very excellent meteorite collection. Currently, he serves as president of the Vatican Observatory Foundation, which funds much of the research done with their telescope. And as recently as 2 months ago, he was appointed as director of the Vatican Observatory, so he wears 2 hats. The Vatican has an observatory with a 1.8 meter telescope. That means the telescope is 6 feet in diameter, very large telescope, located in the clear and very dry atmosphere of Arizona. Brother Guy is actively engaged in research of meteorites, their densities, origins, and compositions. Also asteroids, dwarf planets, and several small bodies that revolve about the sun. He served as a chair of the Division of Planetary Sciences of the American Astronomical Society, and is the past president of a section of the International Astronomical Union, which deals in part with naming and organizing our understanding of the solar system bodies, including, by the way, putting Pluto into its new category of dwarf planet. Last November, Brother Guy was awarded the Sagan Medal by his peers for his outstanding communication by an active planetary scientist to the general public. Because of Brother Guy's years of scholarship, he was honored with the naming of a new asteroid, a newly discovered asteroid, I should say, namely 4597 Cosmologno. Yeah. Brother Guy has authored over 6 books. In his book, Brother Astronomer, Adventures of a Vatican Scientist, he shares his views that science and faith can share a common understanding of the human experience. In it he writes, quote, The desire for truth and understanding, including understanding the truth of the natural world, was given to us by God in order that it would lead us to God. It is the desire of God. It is why I am a scientist. It is why the Vatican supports me. Another of his books entitled, Would You Baptize an Extraterrestrial? And Other Questions from the Astronomer's Inbox at the Vatican Observatory. Along with his co-author, Father Paul Mueller, he takes that question and turns it into a wonderful discussion of what it means to be in the kingdom of God and to be blessed with baptism into Christ. The question in the book title may be amusing, but with or without the existence of extraterrestrials, it is a serious conversation. The book contains other frequently asked questions, along with carefully researched scholarship on the Galileo affair, the Star of Bethlehem, the Big Bang in Genesis, and more, all written with a delightful sense of humor. It's a great read, especially for anyone who thinks about the relationship between science and faith. I believe that some of these books will be available for purchase at the bookstore. He will be available in the dining hall over the noon hour if anyone would like to meet and visit with him. And he will be giving a second talk at 7 p.m. this evening at St. Anne Church, and this one entitled Adventures of a Vatican Astronomer. Is that correct? Okay, good. Brother Guy's visit offers us an opportunity to learn not only from a world-class astronomer, but also from a brother in Christ who has carefully explored the seam between science and Christianity, and has found that seam to join rather than separate. We want to thank the Kenya Institute for Faith and Culture and the Bristol Herald Courier for sponsoring Brother Guy's visit to King University and to the Tri-Cities. So let's welcome our visitor.
Well, you can hear me? Great. The whole theme of this is into the spaces of wonder, and so I thought it'd be fantastic to give you a sense of that space and a sense of that wonder. But I'm going to start first with a short film clip because a lot of people want to know about the Vatican Observatory, and this does it better than I can. The people speaking on the film are much better than me.
Both science and conversations about the universe. They're ways of learning how we interact with this universe. It's not simply a question of is there a God, but there is a God, now what do we do? It's not just a question of there are a bunch of stars, but rather, why are there stars? How do they work? How does that tell us how things work here on Earth? The interaction that I see in my own life is that religion gives me the reason to do the science.
Back in the papacy before Francis was Benedict, and one of his lines in a final elocution to the fathers of the General Congregation was, go to the frontiers. Well, there isn't much more frontier than 3.7 billion years away.
The first official interest of the Church for astronomy started in 1582 with the reform of the calendar. Then in 1891, Pope Leo XIII wanted to have an observatory to show that the Church is not against science, but the Church promotes good science.
They start out by having telescopes on the Tower of the Winds, and then on the walls surrounding the Vatican, as the city lights grow, and as the Italian government gives them back the territory out in Castel Gandolfo. In the 30s, they build new telescopes on the roof of the Papal Palace in Castel Gandolfo, best telescopes of their era in the 1930s. By the 1980s, light pollution makes those telescopes unusable, so we build a new telescope in the dark skies of Arizona.
I'm Father Jean-Baptiste Kikwaya Eluo. I'm working in 3 projects. The first one is NEOS, Near Earth Object. So what I'm doing NEOs, just observe them using our modern telescope VAT. The second project is meteors. I worked on very faint meteors, what we call shooting stars. And the third project is set fireball network. They will have 4 cameras here around Tucson so that actually we can monitor any fireball getting into the Earth atmosphere in the region.
This telescope, the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, it was the first of the new technology telescopes that has been considered pretty much the norm now in developing telescopes. With the advance of computer technology, we have the capability of bringing that advanced technology directly into our telescope. So it's an expandable, it's almost like it's a living machine, so it can grow as technology grows.
It is still very important to maintain scientific research in the Vatican, simply because there is still a lot of confusion about this relationship between science and faith. We are not out here trying to prove the existence of God by looking through a telescope. That's not what we're doing. But we can say that if we want to obtain any reasonable results looking through that telescope, we need to do it embracing a certain work ethics that is, in fact, the same work ethics that the Bible itself tells us through commandments and through the Gospels to embrace.
Human beings look at the stars and wonder. They want to know, what is that? What is that about? How do I fit in? They hear about the moon landing and they want to know, what was that like? If we're part of the human race, we're part of the race that went to the moon. We're part of the species that looked at the stars and wondered, what the heck are those things? Looking at the sky reminds you that there's more to the universe than what's for lunch. What's more, if you believe in a universe that God so loved that he sent his son, then not only are you going to want to study the universe because it's kind of cool, it's an act of worship. It's an act of getting closer to the Creator and getting closer to a universe, as St. Athanasius said 1,500 years ago, was cleansed and quickened by the Incarnation. Then, doing science is an act of worship. I want to start with a little quote from one of my favorite writers, G.K. Chesterton, who's sort of a predecessor of Frederick Buechner. In Orthodoxy, he writes, "The earth is so very large and the cosmos is so very small. The cosmos is about the smallest hole that a man can hide his head in." What does he mean by that? You know, he was the master of paradox. Part of what he means is that reality, you look out the windows, you walk outside, this is what we live in, and it's huge. Cosmology is what we think the universe is, and our thoughts are only as big as our imagination or our brain or our head, and often don't do justice to the universe itself. But we can look beyond that with both the eyes of science and the eyes of faith. "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down, when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways, even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord. You know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand on me." Having the sense of this Creator God who has made us and made this universe means that we have an obligation to get to know that universe, and to know it not only in terms of the science is wonderful, but to remember that it's a reality we're walking in. I'm showing another little clip here with a friend of mine who works at JPL.
Steve Collins, and Steve is the attitude control manager on NER. Actually, until this morning, I didn't have any idea what Steve was going to talk about. And when he told me the difference between abstract and reality for him, I think you're going to find his story very, very interesting.
Thank you, Farouz. I'm actually just one of the many ACS engineers, kind of our boss is Miguel San Martin. And I wanted to tell you a story today about an event that happened a few weeks after the two landings. I'm an attitude control system engineer. I'm responsible for the gyros and the thrusters and the software that keeps the spacecraft or the rover pointed in the right direction. And as such, I live in this world of numbers. And sometimes it's hard to go from those numbers to the picture of what the spacecraft is doing. But that's kind of the job, is to figure out from the numbers, what direction is the spacecraft pointed today? So a few weeks after the landings, we were kind of in a groove at that point. We were living on Mars time, and so we were coming in at weird hours and not sleeping very well. So it was the middle of the night, and I was in the control room. I was just coming off shift, and somebody, one of the other engineers, came by the console and kind of just, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Go up to the 6th floor and check out the pictures." And then, he kind of went away. It was kind of like it was a secret, or something special. And so I went up, once I got off shift, I went up to the 6th floor to the UN Conference Center. That's what, a lot of you know the room I'm talking about. It's this large conference room where the science working group makes their, argues about who's going to do what with the rover the next day. And it has a big U-shaped table and microphones at all of the chairs, and it looks like the UN Conference Center. One of the things that they have in there is this high-resolution projection TV that's like goes onto a screen 15 feet wide. And so I go in there, and the place is dark. It only gets used a few hours a day when the science team is making all these critical decisions about the rover planet. But so I go in there, and it's dark, and it's quiet, and there's a picture up on this big high-resolution screen. And you can't really make it out. And you can't really make it out because it's in 3D. And it's in the fancy kind of 3D, not the red-green glasses kind, but the kind that takes a set of special electronic glasses. And when you put them on, you can see the picture in color, in the actual natural color, but it's in 3D. And so I go in there and I step to the center of the room in the middle of this big U-shaped table, and there's a pair of glasses there on the table, and I put them on, and I'm standing on the surface of Mars. You can roll the clip that we have of this. And what I'm looking at is a colored, high-resolution panorama of the Spirit landing site, and it's in 3D. And off in one corner I can see Sleepy Hollow, which is a sand trap that we decided we wanted to be careful and not drive into. And the thing slowly pans around, and as it pans around, you can see where the airbags have been drawn back up and left straight marks in the soil. And when we pan around a little bit farther and off in the distance, there's a line of mountains you can see, and as it goes farther, you can see the whole expanse of the Columbia Hills out in the distance. And it's like changed from being a set of numbers, on these telemetry screens to being a place. It's a place. And I'm thinking, I wonder if we could drive the rover all the way over to the Columbia Hills. Could we possibly do that? I sat there in the dark by myself for maybe 20 minutes and just, let this panorama scroll by and, thought about, look at what we've done. It's a place. That's the view that an astronaut is going to see when they step out onto the surface of Mars for the first time. So I went back downstairs to the MSA and tapped my buddy Tony, who had just replaced me on shift, and I told him, when you get a chance, when you have a chance for a break, go up to the 6th floor and check out the pictures.
Steve, you may recognize if you were following when the latest lander landed and they had the view of the crew. There was the guy with the mohawk and then long-haired hippie guy. Well, he was long-haired hippie guy. He's a friend of mine. We know each other from the science fiction world. Actually, his background is in theater because he's an expert at knowing how to make stuff work when it's got to work now in real time. And that's how he steers the spacecraft. His wife is actually the costume designer for the Los Angeles Opera Company. And I'm showing you some of the images of Mars to remind you that it is a place. It's a place with rocks and sand, and it's a world where you can walk around. It's a world where you can have adventures. Some of you may have seen the movie The Martian. This is not Hollywood. This is the real thing. This is what's actually there. And you've got to remember, at the end of the day, the things that we think about, the things that we talk about are real places. There actually is a Rome. There actually is a moon. And they're places that we have visited. You can see tire tracks on the surface of Mars. And you can do the science that says, by the way that the weight of the rover has changed the soil, I can tell that the dust must be, fine like flour, and it has these properties. Or I can just look back and say, we've been there. We've littered on the place, We've already left litter on the surface of Mars. And it's not all a bad thing. It's got the tang and the touch of human beings there now. And looking at the surface, you can see that it's a combination of dust and rock and sand dunes, and the rocks themselves show these physical properties as they've made layers and then have a layer of dust, fine as flour, on top of the rocks. Rocks that are in layers that geologists get very excited about seeing, rocks that have been piled up because there have been impact craters, valleys where rocks have been exposed, and valleys that are full of sand. You can walk on the surface of Mars and have adventures. Most of what we're seeing here are images by landers, and the landscape looks very flat because they send the landers where it's very flat because it's safe there. But as we've gotten more adventurous, we've been able to have landers that can travel to more adventurous places. The most recent lander came near this set of mountains, and you can see the stratigraphic sequence of rocks going up the mountain. Not only can you see these mountains in the distance, but you can begin to see craters filled with sand over lenses of material that we now believe are lumps of ice. One of the things the Martian movie got wrong. Finding water would be trivial. It's underneath almost all of that sand. And in fact, you can see the grooves down the sides of Mars and places where you can see liquid water actually came out from the surface. Mars is a place where we can walk, a place where we can see changes, and a place lit by the same sun, only a little bit smaller and a little bit further away. Be praised, my Lord, through all your creatures, especially through my Lord, brother Sun, who brings the day, and you give light through him, and he is beautiful and radiant in all his splendor. Of you most high he bears the likeness. Do you recognize the source of that? The Canticle of St. Francis, the Canticle of the Sun. The source of the inspiration of Pope Francis's most recent encyclical about embracing and finding joy in the universe. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, so high I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Where could I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, your right hand shall hold me fast. Anywhere on earth, we are under the care of the Creator. And indeed, be praised, my Lord, through Sister Moon, goes the canticle. Interesting in that picture of the earth and the moon, sometimes it's called earthrise. The earth doesn't rise. The moon is always keeping the same face towards the earth, so the earth will always be roughly that high above the equator. Only the earth will be seen to go through phases. This is from a Japanese spacecraft going over the North Pole of the moon. And the moon is a place we visited not only with robots, but with people. And little vehicles that we can drive. And we've not only sent people to the moon, we've sent Presbyterians. Buzz Aldrin was an elder in the Presbyterian church outside of NASA's headquarters in Clear Lake. When he was on the moon, he had 15 minutes of free time where he took the communion species, the bread and the wine, and had communion on the moon. Now, for the Catholics in the audience, I remind you, it's Presbyterian communion, but still. We're at a Presbyterian school, we can respect that. I've never been to another planet, but one place I have been that's close to another planet is Antarctica. 20 years ago, I flew there, landed here in the Antarctic ice with a team that set up a camp to go searching for meteorites. I mean, I'm an astronomer. Two things you know about astronomy. You wait till it's dark and you look up, right? So we're going to a place where it never gets dark because it's, you know, the 24-hour daylight of summertime. And instead of looking up, we're looking down. We're looking for meteorites, rocks from space that have landed. They land everywhere, but they're really easy to find in Antarctica because Antarctica is white and the rocks are black. That kind of show up. This was our camp at midnight. I'm looking due north and the sun has not quite set. And the wind always comes, or I'm looking due south rather, because I'm looking across the pole at the sun. The wind is coming from the south. I've walked downwind because it's midnight. What am I doing up at midnight? Have you ever had to get up at midnight? This is what you do in Antarctica too. And you take your drinking water from the other direction. But Antarctica is a place also where you can have adventures. It's a place of wind and ice and snow. Be praised, my brother, through my Lord, through brothers, wind and air, and clouds and storms, and all the weather through which you give your creatures sustenance. What we would do in Antarctica was get in skidoos and drive across the ice, waiting until we could get to a region where you would see a black rock. The blue ice is places where the flow of the ice has concentrated the meteorites that have fallen over thousands of years. So about every 20 minutes you find another rock, including that famous rock that maybe has evidence of life. But it's like driving on top of the ocean. And it's also the closest I've ever been to being on another planet. Thousands of miles from anywhere. That little bit of snow that you see on the surface there, that's not a little bit of dusting of snow. That's a crevasse. You step there and you will crash through it into a crack in the ice. And if you're lucky, you won't break a leg and they can pull you out. I had a friend who put down that the gravity of one galaxy ripped the stars of another galaxy into a path that now orbits around the galaxies. And within the galaxies are stars that themselves grow and change and use up their fuel and burp out gases that become the gases from which new stars are formed. So that a cloud of gas can be hit with the shock of a supernova, condensed into small disks, and out of those disks, a new cluster of stars are formed. including our own son. Be praised, my Lord, through brother Fire, through whom you brighten the night, beautiful, cheerful, powerful, and strong. We know in the book of Genesis, God creates the universe and looks at it and says it is good. We know in the gospel, in the letter of St. Paul to the Romans, from the beginning of time, God has revealed himself in the things he has made. By studying meteorites like this, by studying stars like we've seen, we can learn something about God. But the deeper question is, why do we do it? What motivates us to do the astronomy? And that was expressed by St. Francis, who reminds us we're doing it out of praise. We're doing it out of joy. That astronomy is not only the scientific study of the universe, but the reason we go into the lab every day is because of that joy. The joy and the love of just playing with those meteorites, touching pieces of outer space. I end with a favorite quote from Chesterton. The essence of all pantheism, he writes, is that nature was our mother. But the main point of Christianity is this: nature is not our mother, nature is our sister. Nature was a solemn mother to the worshippers of Isis or Cybele, to even Wordsworth or Emerson, but to St. Francis. Nature is a sister, and even a younger sister, a little dancing sister, to be laughed at as well as loved. We are children of the same Father. We have to love our siblings. And that's true wherever we find them, whatever planet they are, how many tentacles they've got. We don't know if there's going to be anything out there, but we've got to be ready. And we do it with that sense of joy. If not sense of joy, well, maybe a sense of humor.
Why does the Vatican have an astronomical observatory? For instance, you're the curator of meteorites at the Vatican. Why do they curate meteorites? Are they looking for the shooting star of David? What?
No, in fact, the whole idea of having astronomers really got started with the reform of the calendar back in the 1500s. And since then, just studying the universe is a great way to remind yourself that there's more important things in life than what's for lunch.
What is for lunch?
Thank you very, very much. End at 10 o'clock. It's exactly 10 o'clock now. So if people need to leave, I think it's now safe. But if you want to stop, I'll be happy to answer questions for a few minutes.
And he is available during the lunch hour over in the cafeteria to talk with us. And please go forth with the joy of the mystery of wonder, the miracle of life, and to remember that you yourself are fearfully made. All right, see you later.